Welcome to Marlene's Atelier and this special edition of the Ultimate Beginners Workshop. In this first of a four-part series, I'm going to be introducing you to the most essential tailoring tools I use in my workshop. I'm going to introduce you to what they are, why I use them, and where to procure them. So you're not going to want to miss this lesson. That's what's happening today in this special edition of Marlene's Atelier. All right, let's dive right in. And what I have here in front of me are a bunch of tools that we use to basically measure, do our patterning, pattern making, when we're looking at laying and chalking our cloth, and then finally cutting our cloth, all right, and other materials. So the first tool that I want to share with you is a tailor's tape, all right? So it's our measuring tape. And what makes this measuring tape different than a typical measuring tape is we have this nice little metal tip that's about 3 inches long. And why this is so significant is because this metal tip really assists us in making more accurate measurements, because we can keep the tape stable if we're measuring, vertically, or if we're measuring around our client. It helps us get a really firm grip on the measuring tape and keep it stable. And also, because this is nice and stiff, we can get an accurate measurement when it comes up onto the actual tape itself. Also, in measuring, at times, there are a few, I will say, sensitive areas that we have to get into and measure on some of our clients. And so having this little metal area helps us to get in and out of those areas pretty quickly without causing too much embarrassment. The tailor's tape is very much so an essential tool in gathering accurate measurements from our clients, all right? And uses for, has other uses as well. Many times I'll use my tailor's tape when I'm actually laying my pattern out as well, all right? And so we'll just wrap this little guy up here nicely and put him aside. So, all right, and I've had this tailor's tape actually for a good long time. I bought this tailor's tape before I went to London to study. So he's been a good friend, old reliable, as they say. All right. The next tool I want to share with you is this really nice graded ruler. Okay, so it's really important to have a see-through graded ruler because when we're patterning, this is probably one of the more essential tools. Patterning, and when we're laying and chalking our cloth, this is very necessary because it's see-through. It allows us to judge more accurately when we're measuring from one line to the next or one point to the next. And this is a really nice ruler because it has very specific measurements that we use very often. So, obviously 1 centimeter, but we have a 2 centimeter mark here, 2.5 mark, 3, and it goes, the ruler itself is just about 6 centimeters wide, and it's 50 centimeters long. So it has a lot of nice little features to it. And this is a ruler that's actually made by Moreplan, which is a company in London. They're a little difficult to work with because they don't really ship to the United States very well. So if you're interested in this type of ruler, please let me know, and I do have a source that I can get them through, a British connection, if you will. And there's a couple other rulers here as well, so from Moreplan. But this one, I would say, if there's any ruler that you're saying, hey, I absolutely need to have, it would be this one. All right, so this is great ruler. The next ruler I want to share with you is our L ruler, okay? Now, this ruler is really an essential tool to have when you're patterning, because when we pattern, all right, the one thing that we do that's super duper important is we have to make sure that all of our vertical and horizontal lines are squared with one another. And that's very important if we don't want to cause unnecessary fitting issues down the road because we have lines that are not completely square, all right? So our L ruler is an essential tool in helping us achieve those squared lines. And it has many other purposes, but that's the one reason, or the one essential way that I use it, is when I'm squaring off lines and making a pattern, if you will. All right. And you can see, for example, on this pattern behind me, all of these lines that are both vertical and horizontal here are squared off with one another. All right. So in other words, they're at a perfect 90-degree angle, if you will. All right. It's very important. And then we have our variform curve ruler. And so I know a lot of people, when they get started in patterning, excuse me, they want to collect all kinds of, French curves and that type of thing. And I was guilty of that at one time as well. But I will say that this ruler is really the only curve ruler that you need when it comes to patterning. It'll make any curve that you really need it to. I highly recommend getting one in centimeters if you can. They're a little difficult to find, so if you can't, finding one in inches is absolutely no problem either. This is made by Fairgate, which is a very popular brand of rulers. The squared rulers, the L ruler is also made by Fairgate. So they're a very large company that makes a variety of rulers. So pretty easy to find. The next ruler here that I would say to you is not an absolute necessity, but awfully nice to have, is a smaller graded square, okay? So this one is lovely because it's see-through. It has some really nice squared lines along the side here. It does have a nice line for making a 45-degree angle or finding a 45-degree angle. And so when we're working on patterning in smaller areas where we need to really have a nice 90-degree angle squared, this ruler really comes in handy. And I use it for a lot of different things, like finding the angle of my lapel and so forth and so on. Again, a more plan ruler, so a little difficult to come by, but certainly a convenient ruler to have if you're serious about patterning. So that's a great one. And then lastly, I've got this big guy right here. Now this is my meter stick, okay? You don't necessarily have to have a meter stick, all right? It's nice because if you're drawing a long line and you need to be very specific about how long that line is, then yes, it's nice to have it in centimeters, okay? But what we really use our meter stick for is when we're making our trousers, we'll use this to draw our center line or the crease line because it's very long and it'll help us do that accurately. But it also is a really great ruler for when we're laying our cloth, and if we're working with a stripe or a plaid, we definitely have to straighten those stripes and straighten the plaid. And we use this to do that because it's very long. We lay it on the cloth and then we manipulate the cloth until the stripe is square with the ruler itself or straight with the ruler itself. So it has a lot of different uses when it comes to, patterning and laying and cutting our cloth. It also is a great ruler for, putting it down on pattern paper and keeping things from moving, or on our cloth and keeping things from moving as we're chalking things or whatever. So, but if you cannot find a see-through ruler like this, it's not a big deal. You can definitely go out and buy a wooden yardstick or a metal yardstick. There's plenty of those out there. In fact, Fairgate makes one as well that's very nice. So you don't necessarily have to have this particular brand or type. This is also a Moore plan. All right. So that pretty much does it for the different types of rulers that I use. I also want to just chat with you briefly about pattern paper. This pattern paper is really nice. It's 75-pound pattern paper. I get it from Uline, which is, a shipping store online. It usually comes to me in a day, and it's very reasonably priced. You don't really need anything more than 75 pounds, very honestly, especially in bespoke tailoring, because we're going through and we're making several revisions of our pattern. We're not just making one pattern, okay? So if we're looking at trying to save the planet a little bit, this 75-pound paper is quite enough, and we can recycle it for sure. And then once you have a master pattern, if you wanted to do a heavier paper like a 90-pound, that would certainly be nice. But you wouldn't want to use such a heavy paper just to do 3 or 4 revisions of your pattern. Okay, very easy to come and pretty inexpensive too for the amount that you get at Uline. All right, let's talk about some of our patterning tools outside of rulers. The next tool that I have here is our pattern notcher. Okay, now what a notcher does, is it allows us to make a small little, almost like a little hole or a notch. I can show you here. I've got a couple of notches, but if I just notch the paper here, you can see I've put a couple of notches here. All right. Now, why is that important? Well, when we're actually laying our pattern out on our cloth, all right, and getting ready to chalk it, we need to be able to translate all of the important balance marks and pattern details to the cloth, all right? So as an example, if you look here at the jacket, every single one of these horizontal lines is a balance line, okay? And so what we would do is we would put notches, all right, at each of those balance lines so that we could translate those balance lines to our cloth from the pattern. All right, so a notcher is essential because the more accurate we can be in transferring our pattern to the cloth, the much easier our life will be in terms of trying to fit things. So this is a very important tool. As such is our awl. Okay, now an awl has a very sharp end to it. And what we use this for is poking holes through the pattern in places like where our darts are or our pocket positions are that are in the middle of the pattern that we can't get to. So if we poke a hole in that area, it allows us to bend the pattern back and mark where the pocket position or dart position and so forth might be. All right? So all is very important. Also, it's extremely important to have a good pencil and a very good eraser for, erasing all those mistakes that we happen to make. The pencil that I really like to use is a 2H pencil, which tells you how thick and hard the lead is, okay? And so I don't like a very soft lead because I don't like getting it all over my hands and get it all over my cloth or whatever. So a 2H is really nice because it's not so hard that the line is really fine and you can't see it, and it's not so soft that you get your hands all grubby, okay? So that's my choice. You can get this at any art store, if you will, okay? And then I always use a plastic eraser because they're really the best. They don't leave any marks, and I tend to like to do a lot of erasing when I'm patterning. So there you have that. And then we have our little pin tracer, is what I call it. This guy is really important when we're going in and we're making pattern corrections, okay? We use this tracer basically to trace over the cloth and take and depict the pattern from the actual cloth piece onto our pattern paper. So this guy is really an essential tool in allowing us to do that, all right? Okay, so we've been through a lot of the patterning. A couple more little essentials. This guy here is what we lovingly refer to as the rabbit, but what he is actually a pattern puncher. So he'll put a nice big hole in our pattern and allow us to hang it up, all right, using a pattern hook. So this would hook through the actual hole that we made, and we could hang our pattern up and keep them very neat and organized, because that's very important as well. So there we have that. All right, so that's most of what I would use for patterning. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about shears or scissors, okay? So here I have several different types of scissors, and I use them for a lot of different things. This pair I have here is just a pair of craft shears, and these are Fiskars, and you can buy them at any local sewing retail store. Pretty easy to come by. I like these because they're very easy to use. They're sharp, they cut well. The handle is very comfortable. And that's important, I believe, when you're cutting out a pattern. You want to be as accurate as you possibly can. I mean, you went to all that trouble to pattern it properly, so now that we have to cut it out, let's get it right, yeah? So you want to have something that's comfortable and sharp, and fluid in terms of, you know, the blades opening and closing smoothly. And these are a really nice choice, and they're very inexpensive. So I usually cut paper and some of the materials that we use, foundational materials, and we'll get to those in a little bit, but I'll use these shears to do some of those materials as well. So these are great. Now, in terms of scissors that, you know, you should be looking at to purchase, I can't make that decision for you. I'm going to give you 3 different options here, and then you can decide where you want to start with your shears, okay? The first shear I'll introduce you to is a really nice scissor from Kai, okay? It was a Japanese company. And they make a lot of different sizes. I think they make something that's as small as, you know, 2 or 3 inches, and as large as maybe 10 or 12. What's nice about this shear is that it's a pretty reasonably priced scissor. Because it's made with Japanese stainless steel, they stay really sharp for a long time. I've had this particular pair of shears for just about 10 years now, and they're still pretty sharp. And I use them more so for cutting things like canvas, where I don't want to use my real good scissors on cutting canvases and that type of thing. So these guys have really, really stayed the course, even though I'm using them to cut something that's a little harder or more coarse than normal, all right? But these are a really good starter shear. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, you know, you're still trying to decide if tailoring is something for you, these are really great because you can get a pair of these starting around $60 or $70, and they're easily obtainable on Amazon. So these are a great start, and they're a great backup shear for the things that I've mentioned as well. All right. The next scissor or shear I want to introduce you to is what's called a Wilkinson XO, okay? And this is made by a company out of Sheffield, and these are a really nice step-up type of shear, okay? What I like about these shears is that they're pretty lightweight. but they do have a traditional tailor style to them, where they have the finger support and a very comfortable grip, okay? So what's nice about these two is their price point. They're not terribly, terribly expensive. I think they start maybe around 200, don't quote me on that, around that area. So these are the shears that I have recommended my in-house students and my online students to buy if they were looking to start with something a little bit up from the Kai, okay? You don't have to get all foo-foo, she with the gold. They do have, they definitely have different colors to choose from. So if you're not quite of an exhibitionist as I am, then you can definitely choose a different color, okay? And they also have these really nice leather sheaths that you can store them in and keep them safe. So those are a nice starter shear as well. If you're looking to go top of the line Rolls Royce, okay, there is a wonderful company called Ernest Wright, and they make these beautiful handmade 13-inch tailor shears. All right. Now, I just recently purchased these a couple years ago, and I treated myself. They are very expensive, but unlike the other scissors that I've shown you here, the Ernest Wrights are actually made from a composite steel, all right, which means that they stay sharper a whole lot longer. The downside, however, is that if you get them wet, they will rust. So you have to take extra good care of these. All of your scissors you should wipe down with a very soft cloth and some, machine oil, sewing machine oil after every use, to get rid of all of the little dust particles that come from the cloth, because that will dull the shear very quickly, all right? So I do take very good care of these. These are lovely shears. They're a little heavier, so it does take a little time to get used to them. Probably weigh an extra couple of pounds over. Obviously, because the blade is so much longer, it does take a little time to get used to controlling the blade when you're cutting. If you're a man, you'll obviously have much more luck in terms of opening these shears. My hands are small as a woman, so I did have to really adjust to how to cut and get these open properly. But they're a beautiful shear. The downside to these shears is the company only makes these once a year and does a short run. And so they're a little hard to come by. But if you write the folks at Ernest Wright and tell them that you're interested, they will certainly let you know when they're planning on doing the next run. The beautiful thing about these shears is that they're actually forged from an original mold that was cast in the early 1700s by the original Wright brothers or Wright owner. Okay, so I always found that to be really super cool. And these are probably the closest thing that we will be able to obtain here in the United States to true tailor shears, in my opinion. If you wanted to get a pair of real tailor shears in England, the tradition has been that if you apprenticed and your master tailor wanted to pass his shears down to you when he retired, that would be the way that you'd get a beautiful pair of shears, is from your master tailor. Here we don't have that so much, so we have to go out and kind of forge and dig around, and like I said, I found these and I love them. They're a great shear. So there's that. These will probably run you around $600 or $700. So they do have a hefty price tag, but from what I understand, they will last me a lifetime. My lifetime might not be your lifetime, but more or less. So without having to be sharpened. So again, we have to take care of them and oil them down and all that. All right. They come with this lovely leather storage case and a certificate of authenticity. So these are well worth the money. Okay, and then I just have a few more things left here that I want to share with you. I'm going to push these scissors aside here. I have a very simple shoe shine brush that I use when I'm chalking my pattern on the cloth. If I make a mistake, it's very easy to just erase that and start over. So this is essential for any work you're doing with chalking. All right, it's always good to have a little shoe shine brush handy, new, if you will, not used. That would not be too good for your cloth. The other thing that is really essential is having good chalk. All right, so this is a chalk called Jinbutsu out of Japan. It's a beautiful chalk, and what I love about it is it's like silk. It's like chalking silk onto your cloth. It just goes on so smooth, and the lines are so thin and nice and beautiful, and the chalk stays really sharp for a long time. So this is probably the best chalk that I've ever found in the time that I've been tailoring, and it comes in a variety of colors. I think it's red and yellow and white and blue. We use just the white and the blue down the road. Excuse me. When you start into fitting, you'll come to learn that patterns are not symmetrical after they're fitted. So we use the blue chalk to depict the right side of the pattern, and the white chalk to depict the left. So having those two colors is really important. And then finally, we just have a couple of weights here that are very important. It's good to have some heavy weights for when you're patterning or you're laying your cloth. It's always good to have some heavy weights so that your cloth doesn't slide around, move around, your pattern doesn't shift around on you. So getting some weights is great. And then finally, a chalk sharpener, which I'm showing this to you because it's a traditional tool, and I was very lucky to have a gentleman in England hand make this for me. They're a little difficult to come by. I know there are some people on Instagram that do make these, and you can special order them. But if you cannot come by a chalk sharpener like this, you can always use the blade of your craft shears to sharpen your chalk. And I used to do that for years and years before I got my own chalk sharpener. It worked out fine. So, all right, so that's pretty much all of the tools that we use. Thank you for joining me in the Atelier today. In the second part of our Ultimate Beginners Workshop, I'm going to be introducing you to the foundational materials that I use in all of the garments that I make. You're not going to want to miss that lesson. That's what's happening next time in this special edition of Marlene's Atelier.